I'm not perfect, God, neither are you. Tell these salty motherfuckers to tell the truth. Tell politicians to give up the rooms. Tell silent voters to stand up to the booth.
God, it's me. Can you hear my plea? Feeling like I'm lost in this world, can't you see? Demons creeping in, trying to take control of me. But I'm just trying to find the light, trying to break free. I'm not perfect, God, neither are you. But why you keep forgetting me? What did I do? Trying to have a convo, but you starting to preach. Feeling like I'm on a leash. Can't find no peace. Living in hell, can't you hear my plea? I'm suffocating, can't you see? Why you let these false prophets roam free? While the will run suffer, can't you see? I'm not perfect, God, neither are you. Why you keep targeting me? What did I do? Trying to have a convo, but you starting to preach. Feel like I'm on a leash, can't find no peace.
Hardest battles, strongest soldiers, greatest burden, broadest shoulders, pushing up just like these boulders. This conflict like it's water, still this mercy, take my chalice, seeking grace through all this malice. All of these salty motherfuckers could give up.
Politics and sinners, they all the same. Got me stuck in this endless game. But I won't give up, won't play the role. Gotta do what's best
for my soul.
I'm not perfect, God, neither are you. Tell these salty motherfuckers to tell the truth. Tell these politicians to give up the room. Tell silent voters to stand up to the booth. Living wild but truthfully free. God keep on watching over me. Take my pleas and keep the receipts. I just want all of humanity to be free.
Good morning. How's everybody? It's the Urban Conservative. This morning I'm going to talk about Sanctuary and Silence, Minnesota's $1 million cover-up. But before we get into all that, you always know I play independent music. This is an oldie but a goodie. This is Jim Jones. A lot of y'all probably won't get this, but maybe some real people will get this shit. You know what I'm saying? So this is Church Steps, Jim Jones, and I'll be right back right after this.
Church steps,
heat makers,
wondering what it's gonna be next.
Crack music.
The Lord said to come as you are. He protects babies and fools. You safe for the dumber you are. This is a place of worship, so please leave your guns in your car. Rejoice and put your hands up just like you was coming to spar. Don't matter Christian or Muslim, nigga, hamdulillah. Make sure you giving thanks to the one that brung you this far. Y'all don't see what this nigga done with the stars. Shit, he put some in the sky, boy, I put some in my cars. How you think I've been overcoming these odds? My enemies ain't been running from me, stupid, they been running from God. So, as I spit my psalms over these chronicles, I done dove off the yacht to the bottom, I saw the barnacles, yeah. That's right, I even dealt with the bottom feeders. I've been broke at night, and mama, she didn't know how to feed us. I ain't gonna get that new Prezi, cause they don't know how to lead us. Right now I'm circling this island that was owned by Carlos leaders. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Shit, we at war, I seen niggas that was going out on a gurney. I've been late to court, but I ain't going in without my attorney. I didn't party till we was dead like weekend at the Bernie's. Not to mention my affiliations. You be in or you be out, the homies banging that Billy Nation. Back to back, who's open? Sock by say I'm still a Haitian. Or down Miami, don't worry, I got them killers waiting. Money, what's up? Not to dwell on my past. How many times I got up just because I fell on my ass? My soul ain't for sale, I refuse to sell it for cash. I'm at the back room at the bank, I don't even see the teller for cash. Shit. But the hustle done changed. The streaming farms, there's no more fat farms, nigga. The rustle done changed. It's a long way from the work wet to the church steps. I remember 93, the first set was the worst set. Can't forget all the soldiers that we lost. Tell Nip the marathon continues, I'm still holding the torch. Say a prayer for God though as he's going to court. I won't be happy till Melly is way back home in a Porsche. My gatekeepers try to ruin me. Politicians won't be happy, they don't see growth in the community. I'm a rebel though. They'd rather see separation before the unity. Oh, we got that. They'd rather get a pound to police for impunity. Trying to kill us out here. Here we go again. Damn. I swear, make you shed a tear. Danced around a few charges like Fred Astaire. I did it my way on the highway, nigga. I was never scared. Really though. Never got a Grammy and I'm good with that. But I still park that Lambo where the hood is at. Yeah. No fear. You let money rule you, you let money fool you. This ain't church, little nigga, but let me Sunday school you. Pray for me.
Standing on the church steps, wondering what it's gonna be next. Gonna be next. I done seen it all in the streets, but Lord, I hear you calling me. Oh well, oh well. Standing on the church steps, wondering what it's gonna be next. Gonna be next. I done did all I can do. Hey, Lord, now I'm waiting on you. Oh well, oh well.
Standing on the church steps, wondering what is gonna be next. 'Cause I done did it all in the streets. Lord, I hear you calling me. Oh well, oh well. Oh, oh. I hear you calling me, yeah. Oh Lord, yeah. Standing on the church steps, wondering what is gonna be next. 'Cause I done did all I can do. Lord, now I'm waiting on you. Oh well, well.
I'm Dr. Ben. I've been riding with Jim Jones a long time. And I told him some time ago, hey man, I'm riding with you till the wheels fall off. We're working together. We're struggling together. We're making a difference together. Our people need hope. Our people need inspiration. Our people need to let go all the negativities and embrace the positivities of life. I said 20 years ago, we have to choose life, not choose death. We have to choose hope, not disappointment or disillusionment or alienation. It's time to come together.
That was Church Steps. Jim Jones. And welcome to the Urban Conservative. This morning I'm talking about sanctuary and silence, Minnesota's $1 million cover-ups. Because what people don't understand is this ain't new. All this fraud and, that's the one crazy part, because you look in Minnesota's history, it's there. These people have been allowed. Here's the one crazy thing. What do we vote for? We vote for change. We don't see it. It gets worse. It gets worse. Not better, worse. So then when people start asking where all this money goes, see people getting their feelings. That's the one crazy part, because a lot of people, it's not us. This is public information. A lot of this is, right? So you got news media like Alpha News, Star Tribune, KSTP, WCCO. Then you got all these little ones, right? Even some other ones. And it's really wild. Like some people don't want to see it, and then some people do. My thing is, how long are you going to be bamboozled? How long? Because is your loyalty and motivation behind a political party, or is it behind the people? That's what I really want to know, because over the last few years, we voted in a lot of activists, judges, prosecutors. So even they become police officers, in our state legislators. Where are we getting at? Because I'll tell you right now, as a community, we've gotten worse. All these, and these are political talking points, which is crazy to me, because when you look outside in the streets, this is how you know people are detached from reality versus virtual reality, right? Because virtual reality, Jacob Frey, Brian O'Hara, city council will tell you, oh, homelessness is okay. Violence is okay. But then when you go out into the streets, that's not what you see. That's not what you see. You know what I'm saying? That's not at all what we see. When you go out into the streets, that's how these people aren't for us. They don't even know the communities where we come from. They're like, Reverend Tim Christopher said yesterday on his podcast, he was out there on 36th and Penn, 38th, Lindale and Penn. He was just out there, right? And he's like, why do we listen to these so-called elected officials who don't have no relation to the community anymore? They're not out here. You know, somebody went to Miss Nikki, I shouldn't say somebody, Miss Nikki went to an event last night, and it was Keith Ellison, I believe, and or Tim Walls and Kelly Morrison, right? And maybe one of them names wrong, Walls or Ellison, right? One of them was wrong. Might be both of them, but I think one of them is wrong. But she was denied entry in. She was denied, allowed to be able to come in. So how was we as constituents supposed to get answers when elected officials block those answers from even being questioned? You know, it's all about a narrative. It's all about more of a what will get them elected than the truth. Because how are we still electing and talking about Jacob Frey when he said he would end homelessness years ago? Yeah, I just don't, I really don't understand it. So I want to get into a little bit. I want to play something for you about the 15th Amendment. A lot of people maybe don't understand it, or I didn't either at first. I thought maybe I did, but damn, I guess I really didn't understand the 15th Amendment until I really watched this. So I want to get into this documentary kind of special, whatever you want to call it. And this is what they didn't want us to know about the 15th Amendment, because that was ratified in 1870. So this is way before a lot of our times, and maybe context, you know, what it was written for was taken out, because we're seeing that a lot coming up in today's times. So I think the better that we're educated about something is that the better we can do as people. So I want you to learn about the 15th Amendment.
In the turbulent wake of the American Civil War, as the dust settled on battlefields soaked with the blood of a divided nation, the United States stood at a precipice. The war had torn apart more than just its landscape. It had stripped away the old certainties of life under slavery and revealed a new and uncertain future. For millions of formerly enslaved African Americans, emancipation was not simply the end of physical bondage, but the beginning of a fraught journey toward full citizenship. And at the heart of this quest for recognition, dignity, and equality stood one profound aspiration: the right to vote. To cast a ballot was not merely a civic act. It was a declaration of manhood, a belonging, of equality under a constitution that, for nearly a century, had regarded Black people as little more than property. The right to vote was the key that could unlock the doors of political power, economic opportunity, and social respect. It was the cornerstone upon which a truly free and democratic society could be built. But winning that right, securing it, defending it, and wielding it, would demand a struggle as fierce and enduring as the fight for emancipation itself. The story of the 15th Amendment is a story of promises made and broken, of courage in the face of ruthless opposition, of legal triumphs that stood in sharp contrast to the brutal realities of life for African Americans in the Reconstruction-era South. It is the story of Black men who defied the odds to vote and hold office, and of a nation wrestling with the meaning of democracy and citizenship. It is also a story of betrayal and disenfranchisement, of how white supremacy sought to crush Black political power through violence and law, and of how the promise of the 15th Amendment was left to future generations to redeem. This is a story that begins long before the ink dried on the amendment's text in 1870 and continues long after, unfolding in courtrooms and polling places, in movements and marches, in the ongoing fight for civil rights. To understand the 15th Amendment is to understand both the possibilities and the limits of American democracy, and to grasp the enduring challenge of making freedom real. Even before the Civil War, debates over Black suffrage had stirred the conscience of the young American Republic. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, free Black men in some northern states possessed the right to vote, though often under strict property qualifications and in the face of pervasive racial prejudice. New York, for example, maintained a property requirement for black voters that was not imposed on white men. In other states, such as Pennsylvania, black men who had once exercised the franchise were systematically disenfranchised by state constitutional revisions. By the 1850s, the idea that African Americans could be full participants in the political life of the nation was almost entirely extinguished outside the abolitionist movement. The Supreme Court's infamous 1857 decision in Dred Scott v. Sanford declared that black people had no rights which white men were bound to respect, and that they could not be citizens of the United States. This ruling seemed to close the door on any hope of black suffrage. But the Civil War transformed the nation's moral and political landscape. As black men fought and died for the Union cause, they claimed an undeniable stake in the future of the Republic. More than 180,000 African American men served in the Union Army and Navy, and their courage on the battlefield lent powerful moral force to their claims for citizenship and suffrage. The question of black voting rights emerged almost immediately after the war ended in 1865. With the Confederacy defeated and slavery abolished by the 13th Amendment, attention turned to the terms by which the Southern states would be readmitted to the Union. Would they be permitted to restore white supremacy in their political institutions, or would they be required to recognize the rights of their black populations? In the immediate aftermath of the war, President Andrew Johnson's lenient policies toward the South emboldened ex-Confederates to reestablish white-dominated governments. The notorious Black Codes, enacted across the South, restricted the freedom of African Americans and sought to return them to conditions that resembled slavery in all but name. These developments horrified Northern Republicans, who believed that the war's sacrifices would be rendered meaningless if freedom was denied its full measure. Congress responded by asserting greater control over Reconstruction. The passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the ratification of the 14th Amendment were key steps toward defining and protecting black citizenship. But many Republicans believed that legal equality would be hollow without the political power conferred by the right to vote. The Reconstruction Acts of 1867 marked a turning point. These laws divided the South into military districts and required Southern states to draft new constitutions guaranteeing black male suffrage as a condition for readmission to the Union. The enfranchisement of black men transformed the political landscape of the South. Hundreds of thousands of newly registered black voters elected representatives to state constitutional conventions, which produced progressive new governments that expanded public education, reformed labor laws, and in some cases provided for equal access to public accommodations. During this period, black men not only voted in large numbers, but also held public office. In South Carolina, which had a black majority, African Americans won significant representation in the state legislature. Black men served as congressmen, state senators, sheriffs, and justices of the peace. Their participation in governance was unprecedented and deeply unsettling to many white Southerners, who viewed black political power as a direct threat to their social and economic dominance. Even as Reconstruction governments in the South enfranchised black...
Let me ask you a question. Why is it that most men, right, black men, stay out of politics, right? Or it's more of they go after it's joining the white man's politics. When it's obviously, you can see that we have no political, really economic power. Because I will tell you right now, there's more people that are paid by the government that we believe that are there for us. But why would you... Here's the thing of it. Why would the government pay people to honestly change to make sure that they're preventing violence, that they're preventing? Because then if they're doing that, right, we get rid of wars. We get rid of that, the acronym of black on black violence. We get rid of that myth, right? We get rid of that narrative that they cause. And that's what I want people to see, is that why would you, as the government, why would they use our taxes to prevent the things that we're asking for? To end homelessness, to make sure that there's no kids hungry. Why would they do that? So when we see things like feeding our future, when we see things like daycare fraud or senior citizen fraud or PCAs or peer recovery specialists, drug treatment, why would the government want to get rid of that? And they make so much money off of that. They make so much money off of drugs. Yes, it kills many Americans, but they make billions. If they close down the border, like, from shipments, and how are you getting drugs in? How are you getting these guns? We have to understand is that our government gets paid from that. And they have a big, that's what people will never understand, right? Because when you look at Minnesota, a lot of our problems have been here, but way before 2020. Way before 2020. It's that people didn't want to notice it. If it was out of sight, it was out of mind. And when people talked about Miami of the North, and Minnesota, when they talked about mobs, when they talked about, all these drugs, and, people didn't like that because it was causing them to not get paid. And yet people still don't want to talk about it. But I will tell you right now is that I think people are coming out from being scared and making posts. Because what is the fastest way to alert people of what's going on around you? Social media. And you're seeing more and more and more people talking about Minneapolis history when it comes to gangs. There's so many documentaries. Put in Minneapolis. I forget what Minneapolis corruption. Just put that in YouTube. See how much comes up. You see things in there about George Floyd, Jamar Clark, Philando Castile, David Smith. There's so much in there, and you're like, damn, Minneapolis has been like that. And there's so many. It's not just, here's the thing of it is, it's not just black people. There's white people who have actually made documentaries about how corrupted Minneapolis is, and people that don't live in Minneapolis or don't really care about Minneapolis don't get it. Because I think about this to myself every day is when I go to Minneapolis and I see the area that I grew up in, it doesn't look the same. And I get it. Yes, it should look different because of over time, but it shouldn't be dragged down. It shouldn't look worse. You shouldn't see, that's the one thing, because the elementary school I went to, Laura Ingalls Wilder, is not the same. It looks different. Even when you go to Powderhorn Park, I remember going over there, during July 4th. I remember playing for Powderhorn Park football. Rivalries used to be the biggest ass thing in Minneapolis when we were kids. And I mean, I'm sure that's like 30 plus years ago, but rivalries were really big when it came to our youth sports. It was really big. And to be honest, I kind of feel like that was how you connected communities. A lot of people don't want to talk about the West Side Boosters in St. Paul. How long have they been? They've been around for a very, very long time. Even when you look in North Commons in North Minneapolis, I remember the Hospitality House. There were so many different things that we did. And now you don't really see that. You don't see that unity. You see more of that division because it's about an agenda. And a lot of people don't agree with this agenda that's going on right now. So let me get back to what they don't want us to know about the 14th or 15th Amendment.
Black men, the issue of voting rights remained unsettled at the national level. Northern states, particularly in the Midwest and Northeast, still denied suffrage to black men through state laws or constitutional provisions. A proposed amendment guaranteeing the right to vote, regardless of race or color, seemed necessary to consolidate and extend the gains of Reconstruction. The drafting of what became the 15th Amendment was the subject of intense debate in Congress. Radical Republicans, led by figures like Charles Sumner and Thaddeus Stevens, argued for a sweeping guarantee of voting rights that would eliminate all forms of discrimination, including those based on property, literacy, or education. They believed that any loophole left in the amendment's language would be exploited by white supremacists to disenfranchise black voters. Moderates in the Republican Party, however, were wary of overreaching. Many were unwilling to impose universal suffrage on northern states or to disturb existing voting qualifications unrelated to race. The final language of the amendment represented a compromise. It prohibited the federal and state governments from denying or abridging the right to vote on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. While it forbade explicit racial discrimination, it left open the possibility of disfranchisement through ostensibly neutral mechanisms such as literacy tests or poll taxes. The 15th Amendment passed Congress in early 1869 and was sent to the states for ratification. Its approval was far from guaranteed. White supremacist resistance was fierce in the South, and even in the North, the amendment faced opposition from Democrats and some conservative Republicans. Nevertheless, through a combination of political pressure and strategic alliances, the necessary 3/4 of the states ratified the amendment, and it was certified on March 30, 1870. The ratification of the 15th Amendment was hailed by its supporters as a monumental victory for democracy and equality. For the first time in American history, the right to vote was constitutionally protected for African American men. Celebrations erupted in black communities across the country. In Washington, D.C., an enormous parade featured black veterans, fraternal organizations, and schoolchildren. Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist and statesman, declared that the amendment was a final seal upon the work of emancipation. In practice, the 15th Amendment enabled a remarkable flowering of black political life. Black men voted in large numbers in the elections of the early 1870s, electing black congressmen like Joseph Rainey, Robert Smalls, and Hiram Revels. They participated in local government and helped shape policies that expanded public education, improved infrastructure, and defended civil rights. But the triumph was short-lived. White Southerners, determined to restore white supremacy, resorted to terror and violence to suppress black political participation. The Ku Klux Klan and other paramilitary groups waged a campaign of intimidation, attacking black voters, murdering Republican leaders, and disrupting elections. Congress responded with enforcement acts of 1870 and 1871, which made it a federal crime to interfere with voting rights and authorized the use of federal troops to suppress insurrection. These measures had some success in curbing violence, but they could not overcome the deep-seated hostility to black suffrage. As Northern support for Reconstruction waned in the mid-1870s, federal enforcement of civil rights laws diminished. Southern states, under the control of Redeemer Democrats, enacted laws that effectively disenfranchised black voters through poll taxes, literacy tests, understanding clauses, and grandfather clauses. These methods were often administered in a discriminatory manner by white officials determined to exclude black voters.
This is Wix Studio, the platform for agencies and enterprises, built to meet any brief.
The Supreme Court played a crucial role in undermining the promise of the 15th Amendment. In United States v. Reese, 1876, the court ruled that the amendment did not confer an absolute right to vote but merely prohibited certain forms of discrimination. This decision opened the door for states to use ostensibly neutral qualifications to disenfranchise black voters. Subsequent decisions continued this trend. In Williams v. Mississippi, 1898, the court upheld Mississippi's constitution, which imposed a combination of literacy tests and poll taxes that disenfranchised most black voters. The justices reasoned that the laws did not explicitly mention race, and therefore did not violate the 15th Amendment. By the early 20th century, black disenfranchisement was almost total in the South. In some states, fewer than 1% of eligible black men were registered to vote. The promise of the 15th Amendment had been rendered hollow by state laws and judicial indifference. Despite these setbacks, African Americans continued to fight for their voting rights. Activists challenged discriminatory laws in court, organized voter registration drives, and demanded federal intervention. The modern civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s brought renewed attention to the disenfranchisement of black Americans. The Selma to Montgomery marches in 1965 and the brutal repression of peaceful demonstrators at the Edmund Pettus Bridge galvanized national support for voting rights legislation. Under the leadership of President Lyndon B. Johnson, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which enforced the 15th Amendment by prohibiting racial discrimination in voting and authorizing federal oversight of elections in jurisdictions with a history of discrimination. The Voting Rights Act restored the franchise to millions of Black Americans and mark a new chapter in the struggle for equality. But the fight was not over. In recent years, Supreme Court decisions such as Shelby County v. Holder, 2013, have weakened key provisions of the Voting Rights Act, raising concerns about the persistence of voter suppression and the enduring challenges to Black political participation. The 15th Amendment was a landmark achievement in American constitutional history. It represented a bold assertion of the principle that democracy must be inclusive and that political power should not be reserved for a privileged racial caste. Yet its history also reveals the fragility of constitutional rights in the face of determined opposition. The story of the 15th Amendment is not simply a tale of progress, but of resistance and resilience. It reminds us that the right to vote is not self-enforcing, and that the struggle for full and equal participation in American democracy is ongoing. As we reflect on its legacy, we are called to continue the work of making...
So that was about the 15th Amendment. And I do believe that is really... it's time to go back to where we learn about what really matters about surviving in America. It's not about... I know some people think that being able to a pronoun, you think that's living. I would say it like this, is that you've had the women's suffrage movement, you had chattel slavery, you had Emancipation Proclamation, you had Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and we're still out here fighting. But we shouldn't be. It's like Black people have gotten so far from the goal line. It's because our movements have been co-opted. I'll be honest, they've been co-opted. And a lot of it has to do with capitalism. I'll be honest. You want to know what rules the world or what rules America? It's about being a ruler. It's about being a leader. Not being because they think that if you're falling in line with everybody else that you're following. No, you don't have to do the things that we've done, like wars, because I will say it like this: if people don't want immigration, we shouldn't be causing wars or allowing our military to go over in countries. It's because we have interests and we want interest. And I understand that, but you have to understand what comes with that. And a lot of people don't want to get that. I want to talk about state funding. Something potentially could be cut coming up in Minnesota legislature, and that's about Philando Castile. There was a critical police training that was named after Philando. We never really did see any kind of accountability or justice. So it makes it a whole lot easier for them to be able to do things to give it no funding. And it's crazy to me of how Minnesota commits wrongs and never tries to really honestly correct it. So with that being said, I want to get into this $12 million in training that could potentially be moved.
Well, there's growing concern tonight that a key funding source to pay for critical police officer training will be slashed from $12 million to $2 million. Jennifer Hoff is digging deeper into how that could impact police departments across the state. Jennifer?
Julie, the money reimburses departments that pay upfront for the training that the state requires, from crisis intervention to cultural diversity, a fund that dates back to 2018 and one that's named after Philando Castile, who was shot and killed by a cop 9 years ago.
A garden is a place to gather, to even help people heal, like this one off Larpenteur and Falcon Heights, dedicated to Philando Castile, who was shot and killed by a police officer there in 2016.
You carry it with you every day, so it doesn't seem like time is even passing.
His mother, Valerie, vital to reforming public safety ever since.
Yeah.
So much a memorial fund that pays for state-mandated police officer training bears her son's name. That now, though, is in jeopardy.
I was saying to myself, this could not be happening.
For the first time in 7 years, a governor's budget may not approve the Philando Castile Memorial Training Fund that usually includes $6 million a year to reimburse departments for training it requires, from conflict management to use of force. For more than half of them, with fewer than 20 officers, it's the only money they get.
That's significant. That's devastating to the agencies across the state.
Jeff Potts leads the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association.
It's our top priority for the session.
Lobbying last week for the money and long supporting a changing law enforcement culture.
We think the outcomes, their ability to, safely police their communities hinges on how well they're trained. And so these dollars are vitally important to continuing at the high quality training that they're getting right now.
As a budget hangs in the balance at the Capitol, it leaves any aid up in the air. Help, though, is something Castile can at least count on still finding here.
Why would you create such a wonderful thing and then slowly just chip away with it until you have nothing? It's just a disservice to our police force and the community.
There are now amended bills in the Senate and the House that ups the fund to $1 million and $5 million a year, respectively, still nowhere near what's been approved in the past. So the two chambers will have to hammer out a deal in committee meetings that start next week. We also reached out multiple times today to the governor's office to ask about this proposal, Julie, but we never heard back.
Wow.
So to be clear, though, the mandate doesn't go away. So they're still expected to provide that training, but now they have maybe no way to pay for it.
Some departments may very well have no way to pay for this. And that's important too, because as you mentioned, the mandates are still there. And if they don't follow them, then these departments are not in compliance with what the state is requiring them to do. So they'll have to come up with it somewhere.
All right, we know you'll keep watching it for us.
Wow. People better be paying attention to that. So if law enforcement agencies can't pay for that training, and the state's not paying for it, and they're not in compliance, what's going to happen? Why aren't people out here asking those kind of questions? That's a lot of things that I don't understand about Minnesota, is we get so caught up in the bullshit and not in the serious things that are happening, not in like the education, not in the part that, even when it comes to education, let me speak about that for a minute, because how many stories have we seen in the last month about schools, and especially charter schools? Not that I have a problem with charter schools, right? I have a problem that we're not doing our due diligence when it comes to protecting our young minds. And I think we need to start taking that more serious, because how many stories do we need to see of people that are abusing or taking advantage of these young minds, and most people don't do anything. They don't even blink twice. Oh, it's just another story. Just another story. Just another day. But it's not. It's not anywhere close to just another day. Just another story. Because I think people are so used to being in that realm of, oh, we'll just say another name. We'll get one of these times, maybe 1 out of 100, we'll get some justice. We're good with that. What do you mean? Let's make it happen where nobody ever has to go through this pain and suffering ever again. Why aren't we making it about that? Because I will tell you like this, is that it's been a crazy ass week. I will say that. Ever since the Minnesota Reformer came out with that Bobby Champion and Jerry McAfee story, and it's been throwing a lot of connections in with other prominent Black individuals in Minnesota. It's been, some are political, some are, church leaders, some are small business owners, and then some of them are even nonprofits. You know what I'm saying? So it's like a lot of people are ganging up on not the issue. But the person that's out here trying to get answers. And why are people more worried about the messenger and not the message? You know, that's the kind of world that we live in nowadays, is like everything is so political. It's not about, oh, we're going to do the right thing. It's more about, oh, we need to shut him up. We need to shut her up. And a lot of this is public information. It's court transcripts. It's 990 forms. It's contracts that they've signed themselves. You know what I'm saying? A lot of this says when you do a data request, you put in there, well, I want any kind of communications you've had with Salem Inc., any that you've had with A Mother's Love, or We Push for Peace. Sometimes you got to throw some other words in there, you know, what kind of communications, emails, voicemails, text messages. That's what these people won't tell you, is that they snitch, they tell on themselves. If we want to be really vocal about it, they tell on themselves. They want to talk about snitches get stitches. Well, y'all niggas should be out there getting stitches, because everything that's exposing y'all is public information. It's not hidden. You know, the crazy thing of it is that a lot of this shit, what people don't understand is the information's out there. A lot of people don't want to put it together, just like with the city pages. A lot of the articles that they wrote about City Inc. or The Way, or they was writing about Sharif or Mr. Nasby, you know, all this extra bullshit. And they was just sweeping that shit under the rug. And then it would come out in these blogs, and people, they would have, you know, stories about it, and they would talk about it. They would, oh, you know what? Yeah, that was happening. He's not lying. But see, people were mad at the messenger and not the message. They were mad at the messenger, but not mad at the actual, what was happening in the message. Right. It's exactly the same game played in a lot of communities, and a lot of people don't want to look at it. I think a lot of it is being exposed now to like how Minneapolis is connected with Rochester through the Mayo Clinic, and how the Minneapolis Foundation. And I've always said to myself, since I've known that for about 2 years now, is like, why are people that live in the Twin Cities or northern Minnesota have so much involvement in a project called the Destination Medical Center that's going on in Rochester, Minnesota? And it's about the money. It's about the money. Right. Oh, yeah. It is everywhere. And that's you go anywhere where they have a large population of Black. So you go to Rochester, you go to Owatonna, you go to St. Cloud, you go to Albert Lee. You see communities over there, and some are East African, some are Ethiopian, some are Somalian, some are Nigerian. But there is large pockets of populations in these communities. And most people don't want to talk about it, just like really when Christopher Kukanu was killed in Austin by the police, what's really exposed how big I don't know what you want to call it, the population of people not from America was. How much they had to migrate. I don't even know if I to call it a migration anymore, but a big movement of individuals that stayed in one area. Because it really did. It exposed the shit out of yeah. It blew. I'll say this is that when I started going back to Austin, I really did start to notice how it went from most of our factories being predominantly white to being more diverse, more equity, inclusion, whatever the fuck they want to call it. There was way more of that. But then you've seen also with the child labor laws. You know, you've seen all kind of, you know, kids that should be in middle schools or elementaries, and they're working and doing homework at the same time. And it's like, come on, man, we got to do better. And who do we blame? We have to blame ourselves. Until we can look in the mirror and say, you know what, I was a part of that. Not that I allowed it or even that I was involved in it, but I looked and didn't do anything. I knew and didn't do anything. That's a problem. But there's way too many individuals in our communities that do that. You know what I'm saying? I definitely I want to get into Rochester a little bit, but that's what really is hard for me, is because you see this in so many communities. So many communities. And then it's like we're not even worried about our own. Because I will say it like this, is that you see what's going on, and maybe some people do, maybe some people don't. But there's a lot of shit that is going on. And to me, I feel like people aren't paying attention. A lot of things are so involved with this sanctuary status, and we want to do this, we want to do that. And it's like, wait, that's not the church's responsibility. I'm going to be honest, man. The church is a place of healing, is a place of, I know they call it a sanctuary. I'll say it differently. It already should be a place of sanctuary. It should be a place of blessings. It should be a place of healing. But instead, church is so much more than that nowadays. And it's beyond me. It's crazy. Because that separation between church and state isn't as thin or as heavy as it used to be, because there was a divide, and a very strong divide between those two. But I want to get into Rochester Church joins two others as a sanctuary congregation.
A new sanctuary congregation is joining the Rochester faith community after people of Hope Lutheran Church in Rochester voted to become one 10 days ago. The church joins two others with that designation in our area. KIMT News 3's Maureen Dudley joins us in studio with what having a sanctuary church in our area means for immigrant and refugee services. Maureen.
Cammie, People of Hope Lutheran Church joins both First Unitarian Universalist Church and Peace United Church of Christ in Rochester as sanctuary congregations. Both of the other two churches have been sanctuary congregations since 2017. According to the First Unitarian Universalist minister, being a sanctuary congregation and church means being a good neighbor and a place of inclusivity. A sanctuary church is one that provides support and a safe haven for immigrants and refugees. Churches with that designation provide anything from basic necessities, housing search support, and legal work. The minister at First Unitarian Universalist Church says having more churches join that group is extremely beneficial.
We're a city that is made of so many different cultural identities, and that is a blessing in our community. And so we want to make sure that by providing support to immigrant and refugee communities, even if it's just a word of saying, we are better because of your presence, I think that's really critical.
Reverend Stevens Royer tells me that the congregation has been supportive of these efforts. Cammie?
In a Facebook post, People of Hope Lutheran Church says, quote, "As people of faith, we are called by God to love our neighbors. This divine calling compels us to stand with those who are oppressed and marginalized, both in our community and around the world. Through the lens of God's love, we recognize that every person, regardless of immigration status, holds inherent worth and dignity." End quote.
There's so much more that the church could stand for. Yeah, I don't even know, to be honest, I don't even know why the church is getting involved in this. The church is one place that isn't made for man-made law. We shouldn't recognize all this opinion or yeah, this is what makes America the way that it is, so fucked up. And to be honest, people don't understand it. They don't get it. And it's very sad to me. To be honest, it is you see more people trying to confused, then instead of teaching people the true history. That's the way I honestly, I feel about it, is that you have so many individuals out here that are not really trying to solve anything. They're just more of a cog in the system. And it's like, excuse me, can you get out the way? Because I won't understand it. What are you doing? It's because a lot of them be in the way, but don't be in the way. I feel like they're not in the way, but they are in the way. And they are. So I want to get into just play something real quick that happened. Whoops, that happened yesterday in Rochester. Was you had the homeless shelter down there. I shouldn't say the shelter, but the whole community center, whatever you want to call it, warming center. There was a stabbing where a person was stabbed and a person was arrested yesterday. And I want to get into it because they are closed today. But I want to just tell you the story.
In other news tonight, this is another news story at 10. A Rochester shelter will be closed tomorrow after a stabbing incident that happened earlier today. According to Rochester police, 2 men were involved in a fight outside the nonprofit's day center at 4 o'clock this afternoon at the Landing MN. One is being treated for injuries at St. Mary's and is expected to be okay. The other, 52-year-old Ricardo Elizondo Jr., has been arrested. The Landing MN says its staff is conducting a thorough review of safety protocols and had no other comments at this time.
That's wild.
State funding for
That is wild as hell. It's always like we never try to prevent it from happening. We always start taking it serious afterwards. And I do honestly believe we can do so much better. I want to get into, a lot of people may or may not remember this. It was a story in the 4th precinct a few years ago, and it was about a Christmas tree. It was about, I know I talked about it plenty of times, but I want to go over it a little bit again, right? And I want to show you that we need a change. We need a change in our community. And it's like, when can we
and we've learned to
see or feel that change? And it's like, it's crazy to me, because a lot of people don't understand it, or a lot of people don't get it. And it's like, what more do you need to understand? And I want you to look at this, because this is crazy as hell. Now, this is a controversial tree display.
We learned that 2 Minneapolis police officers are on paid leave for allegedly decorating a Christmas tree at the 4th precinct with a bunch of items that are viewed as racist. We have not been able to determine the authenticity or origin of this picture, but you can see it shows a tree decorated with menthol cigarettes, crime tape, malt liquor, Takis, and a cup from Popeye's Chicken. The situation adds insult to injury for a community already to repair a fractured relationship with police. And tonight, both community activists and city leaders say more work needs to be done. Danny Spiewak is live outside the 4th precinct with their responses. Danny?
Well, Julie, the photo from this 4th precinct first surfaced early this morning on both Facebook and on Twitter. And within hours, the NAACP chapter here, as well as a group of other community activists, were calling and demanding action from both the city of Minneapolis and the police department. And we've learned tonight 2 officers have been pulled off duty, still being paid, though, while an investigation continues.
Yeah, it's racist. There's no other way to look at it.
I believe that these decorations were an attack on the black community.
This is nothing new. It's just getting exposed.
To the African American community, the message coming from this Christmas tree is unmistakable.
In essence, they're calling us trash.
They say they're especially disheartened to see this on display in their own police department's building.
It's supposed to serve us and protect us, but instead they oppress.
In response to the photo, a group of activists are demanding the department fire officers responsible. They're also calling for sensitivity training and for more community involvement in the 4th precinct.
I don't blame them one bit for frustration and pain.
Mayor Jacob Fry said early in the day that whoever did it should be fired. but later acknowledged there's a process that needs to be followed. Chief Medaria Arredondo immediately started that process, launching an investigation and saying he was ashamed and appalled at what happened. In a statement, the chief said, "The culture of the Minneapolis Police Department has undergone positive change. However, as this recent incident shows, we still have much work ahead."
It does set us back with people of color.
Michael Friesleben was once in charge of the 4th Precinct before he retired last year. He says the Christmas display undermines the department's mission to repair relationships.
It's sad because it's so senseless, and there's so many efforts to connect with the community and gain trust.
I mean, whatever little bit that they had done so far, the members of the community that thought they could trust the police department now see that they can't.
It has to stop, and we ain't going nowhere until it does.
The tree has been removed here at the 4th Precinct, and just to be crystal clear, the 2 officers have not been fired. They were placed on leave, taken off duty, and still being paid during an investigation that has a lot of layers to it. Internal Affairs is involved, so there's no timetable for when that investigation will wrap up. And I'll point out, too, we did reach out to the police union and did not get a response tonight. Julie, back.
Probably never will. This case with the Christmas tree was so wild, right? This was after Jamar Clark, after where protesters were shot. Where 4 protesters were shot. Some people want to call them white supremacists came over there. I'll just say that they were, that's the whole thing of they were white. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if it was the whole thing of that they wanted supremacy, but I feel like they wanted something that was a killing of a black man, and they wanted to quiet it down, you know. And that's what we've seen over and over and over again in Minneapolis, not only with, and it's not just in Minneapolis, it's in Minnesota. You know, who remembers the incident during COVID in Rochester where the young man was damn near arrested because they assumed because he was bald-headed that he looked like him. Incidents still happen today. You know, I hear people talking all the time of, oh, hey, make sure you got your birth certificate, make sure you got your ID. Listen, honest to God, I don't be worried about none of that shit. Because what the fuck they gonna deport me for? I ain't got no stories out here talking about I'm a MS-13 member. I ain't got none of that shit. So it's like, to be honest, I don't be cared about none of that. And it's insane that other black men in America are afraid that they could be deported. And it just shows me that, honestly, there's somewhere down the line that you're not a black American. You're not from here. And I want to get into this. It's about Minneapolis. But if people don't remember the first couple days after when George Floyd happened, right? With the 3rd Precinct, with, you know, but I want to get into the Umbrella Man. A lot of people don't remember that. And to me, this is how really a lot of it kicked off in Minneapolis that a lot of people don't want to talk about, because when they talk about, you know, the burning buildings and, you know, the aftermath of what Minneapolis did, but they don't talk about who started it. So I want to get into what police say instigator of Minneapolis violence was a white supremacist.
Back all the way at the beginning of the George Floyd protests. And you'll remember there was like a conflagration in Minneapolis. There were riots that were violent that broke out. And then that, of course, spread almost across all kinds of major cities in the country. And at the time, a lot of people on social media looked at this one incident was one of the very first incidents of violence and defacing of property that sort of sparked the entire uprising in Minneapolis. It was this guy who looked very out of place, very unusual.
He looked strange at the time.
Caught people's attention, and you notice, and I'm going to show you the video, but you notice that the activists who were there are telling him to stop, and he's just casually continuing, and this ends up being one of the catalytic events that leads to what we saw unfold across the country. Let's just take a look at that moment.
I ain't got part of that shit. Dude. Oh, I zoomed in. I'll zoom out a little bit. Those cops will come for you if you're pulling that crap.
Looks like, yeah. So as you can see, the auto goes.
Guy just came with a hammer and smashed the windows.
I'm gonna fight you right now.
You wanna go? What's up?
So you see, they're trying to ask him who he is. He won't say.
Yeah, like, who are you? What are you doing?
This was spread. I mean, this video was really viral. And again, this was one of the first violent acts that really sparks everything that happens from there. So that's why it's such a key moment. There were rumors online about how it was one person. It ended up not being that person. Well, now the police in Minneapolis say that they have a suspect based on a tip they received that they believe to be Umbrella Man. They say that he is a member of Hell's Angels, an associate of the Aryan Cowboys, a known prison gang out of Minnesota and Kentucky. So basically a white supremacist who came in explicitly trying to spark riots and spark some sort of race war or something like that. And look, most of what was billed as like outside agitators, remember right when this happened, the mayor came out and was like, oh, it was all people from outside of Minnesota. Turned out not to be the case. Most of the people overwhelmingly who were
from the city,
who were arrested were from the city. So most of the people who were participating in these acts were in fact locals. But this one guy, who police are now saying was in fact a white supremacist, was integral, unfortunately, in helping to spark this whole violent cycle.
It's pretty interesting because you're right, which is why I was deeply skeptical of this, is that the Minneapolis authorities were lying to everybody, being like, oh, it's all outside agitators. It's actually, outside white supremacist groups. None of that was true. It was, and fine, it's okay. It was a local movement, whatever. You're right, and so
well, and there was also an attempt from the right to be like, oh, these are all Antifa people who are flown in, which also was not true. And we have seen some other incidents, I believe in Las Vegas and actually over this weekend in Richmond, where you again had white supremacists who were involved in trying to spark violence. But this one is particularly noteworthy because it really was this sort of catalytic moment.
Yeah, that's right. And, it's going to be interesting to see if they actually find this person and if they get, a tip in terms of what happened here, because this was integral to what I think, spawned the entire violence. I don't want to absolve Minneapolis PD and the city of Minneapolis and these other people who didn't crack down on violence in the very first few days, and which is what I think was the conflagration of the entire country. I do absolutely blame them for being, for basically coddling and apologizing for much of the violence that we saw in the city. But if it turns out to have actually been spawned by a white supremacist, that's a very significant act.
Yeah.
It's very significant.
No, this isn't about absolving anyone for their actions or, the crackdowns from the police that also helped to escalate violence in certain cases and the brutality there, the individual acts of protesters that were, unconscionable in certain instances as well. But yeah, to see that this is potentially was all the initial spark came from a white supremacist is, I think it's important. I think it's deeply disturbing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to need to see more reporting on it. It's certainly interesting.
Absolutely. We'll keep you updated. Tomorrow.
That's crazy as hell because I know that people still talk about that incident today. Now, I want to play something that happened in another city around there. It was a tale of two cities, two houses, actually. It's about Orono, Minnesota. And I want to get into that because it showed corruption in a small city. And I want to play that. I want to show you guys because it did happen. And basically, I just want to show you the pattern and the practices of Minnesota. Doesn't matter when it comes to our senators, our House representatives, school board members, county commissioners, city councils, committee members. commissions. I just wanted to show you that there's a loophole for a lot of this shit, and there's corruption at a lot of the levels of state government.
Turbine Guy coming back at you. Now, where am I today? I'm at what I affectionately dubbed the Lake Minnetonka Skinny House. Right behind here, we can all see it. Now, this house is a 3-story house, kind of got a basement, and then the 2 stories, and it's actually got a little deck on top, it looks like. But the super interesting thing about this is how skinny it is and how he had to squeeze it into this lot. From what I understand, he tried to get variances to get an average size house in here, yet the city wouldn't work with them. They didn't want to. And instead of fighting the city at their own game, he played his own game of civil disobedience and stood up for himself by getting this thing to comply with every code they had, so they had to approve the permit. That's why it looks to be 30 feet tall. That's a height limit. Interesting, huh? Guy standing up for himself by following the rules, and that pisses them off. I'll tell you that. Now, if we look, we can see right here, the corner of the property, it's not straight, which is why that house is angled. And if we pace it off from that stake to the side of the house, we got about 30 feet, which is a rear yard setback. On the far side, it looks to be about 10 feet from the property line, which is a side yard setback. Could even be 7 for smaller lots, 7.5. And here it looks like we got a 30-foot setback or so too. So it's super interesting that he followed all of those to get it in. But if you get to the actual front of the house, from the actual front of the house down to the lake shore is 75 feet, which is the Orono requirement for the lake shore setback. Very interesting how he fit it in. Now, all those requirements wrapped in, this house turns out to be less than 9 feet wide. 9 feet. That's almost nothing. Now, if we look, there's a little bump out in back, probably where the bedrooms are, and that might give you 10 to 11 feet, so you got a little more room in there, but that's it. And I'm sure this thing's as wide as he could get it as well. So he maxed out the square footage. He put the house in that they didn't want, but they had to approve. To me, that's true civil disobedience. Doing what they don't want you to, but still complying with all of their doggone silly rules. Now let's go over to a house where they were given variances and it changed the character of the neighborhood, and let's compare the two. Now we're at the other house, which is really close. As you can see from the map I'm overlaying right now, these houses can pretty much see each other on the lake. So there should be no difference in city regulations and installing them. Yet, what do we see here? We see a house that is well within the street side setback. And in fact, this house got 2 variances, one and then another for this rear yard setback. That other house couldn't get a variance. This one got 2. Not only that, if we come and look at the farthest jut out of this house to where the side of the property is, that's nowhere near 7 to 10 feet, which is a side yard setback. So there's encroachments here. There's 2 variances to make this work. And if we get to the other side, we can see that this setback is as questionable as the other side, especially with how it juts out. There's no way we're 7 to 10 feet back. So I have to wonder how in the world, in a city like Orono, where we supposedly have competent people working up at the city for staff in the zoning and planning department, how the heck do we get this behemoth of a house that's bigger than everything else all around on such a small lot with no trees or anything? How do we get that here And that other house, he's got to build the way he does because the city refuses to work with him. How does that happen? Well, I know, and I'm going to let you figure it out. Turbine Guy, signing off.
This morning. So that just shows you that as long as you're willing to pay for certain things, Minneapolis is willing to play. And it's been that way throughout, history. I want to play a little bit about Minneapolis. Like, it's not 4 years ago now, it's 5. Actually, but first I want to show you that on Tuesday and Thursday of next week, there is ethics hearings for Bobby Champion. So that is coming up next week. Those will be, I'll probably stream those. So just be informed, know it's coming up. Yeah, so just to tell you what they're talking about, they're establishing Senate Rule 55-2, which establishes a mechanism for Minnesota state senators and Senate employees to seek confidential guidance and recommendations from the Subcommittee on Ethical Conduct regarding potential ethical dilemmas or conflict of interest. This allows individuals to proactively address ethical concerns and ensure they are acting in accordance with Senate and relevant laws. So you see this is coming up Tuesday at 11 and then Thursday at 11. So there will be 2 subcommittees next week about Bobby Joe Champion and these ethics committees and conflicts of interest. Just know that report, that complaint that they did make was over 166 pages long, full of complaints. So I'm pretty sure that it'll be a lot. And a lot of people don't really want to talk about that. And to be honest, it's sad to me. It's really sad to me. It's really sad that we don't have individuals that really say they stand for something, because they really don't. But I want to get into about Minneapolis and that night and that week that happened during the George Floyd uprising. So maybe you guys will remember some of this, maybe some of you won't. But this is what happened in Minneapolis, and this is what happened up in that week, minute by minute.
Now, since the 3rd Precinct was abandoned and ultimately burned during the riots that followed the police killing of George Floyd. And tonight, a new perspective on what happened that night from the voices of the men and women who were in the middle of it all. The Fox 9 investigators obtaining police radio transmissions that give a minute-by-minute account of what happened and how things could have been so much worse. Here's Tom Lydon.
By mid-afternoon on Thursday, May 28th, the deck was already stacked against the 3rd Police Precinct, and police radio transmissions from that day paint the stark picture. Surrounded by protesters, the only escape route, out the back alley, already in jeopardy.
To get any more, it's going to be hard for our escape route. We now have over 20 protesters in the south alley, getting close to blocking us in.
And there's already confusion.
Is anyone copying this?
About the game plan and who is calling the shots.
I need to know who's in charge of the details here, and that's what they're thinking.
However you book your flight, first check Kayak to search and compare flight prices from hundreds of sites to find a great deal.
Can't copy it. Y'all gonna hear it just like I hear it.
Was there a general sense that there was a plan for that night?
The plan was to flee.
The plan was to flee.
Officer Richard Walker is a Federation board member who works out of the weapons unit of the 3rd Precinct. He says officers were instructed that morning to clear out their lockers. The precinct would be operating that day with only a skeleton crew. He believes the message was clear.
I've never seen a look of desperation, a look of a sense of loss of hope, and more importantly, a look of disbelief that we were giving up a precinct.
It was necessary that we were taking all precautions and planning for the worst while hoping for the best. And yes, a worst case scenario was the possibility of having to evacuate the 3rd precinct.
Mayor Jacob Fry says to understand what happened Thursday night, you need to go back 24 hours to the looting and protests in the area the night before, Wednesday, when he received a call from Minneapolis Police Chief Medaria Arredondo.
Mayor, I'm asking you to call the governor and ask for the National Guard. I hung up the phone with the chief. I immediately called the governor and I requested the National Guard. This was a guard-sized crisis and demanded a guard-sized response.
The mayor sends Governor Walz a formal request in writing Thursday morning. The governor activates the National Guard that afternoon. But the call-up will take time, and time is running out. Behind the scenes, a fierce argument between city and state officials. Governor Walz and his team want to see a detailed plan, believe Saturday will be the peak of the unrest, and argue the National Guard is a poor choice to handle civil unrest. The city says it can't develop a plan without knowing resources available, and they need help now. And so the city's backup strategy at the 3rd that night is to de-escalate the scene, defend but don't engage, and free up officers to protect the rest of the city.
We didn't want a scenario where we have all of our officers doing one thing, which is protecting a precinct, while other portions of our city burn with no assistance. That was not an option that I would have taken.
Early on, a strategic decision was made to keep a very tight footprint around the perimeter of the 3rd precinct. The only entrance in for police officers would be through this gate to the back parking lot. What they did not fully appreciate at the time, this would turn out to be their only escape route.
By 4:07, protesters are probing a fragile perimeter.
We have information that there's somebody on the Lake Street side of the station with both cars cutting the fence.
We were just told that our
I remember being out there. That's fucking wild.
Assets here in front of us on the southeast corner of the 3rd precinct will be leaving in a few minutes. There will be no buffer.
Police began using rubber projectiles, known as 40s.
They're throwing eggs. We're throwing things at the guys on the line out there. Go ahead and use your 40.
At 5:18, 2 people are stabbed at the target across the street from the 3rd precinct.
They're trying to barricade us in.
Without waiting for paramedics, the injured are loaded into squad cars under a hail of debris. Officers ask for permission to use tear gas.
We are being hit with bottles and rocks, you name it. Permission to use CS. You are authorized to use CS triple case at your discretion. Guys, we got him in. Got him out.
And police soon realize there's a reason the protesters are showing up everywhere they are. They are monitoring their radio transmissions.
People are listening to this channel, and then they follow us to these locations.
By 8:43, the MPD is dealing with multiple hotspots downtown. A large crowd, estimated at 1,500, is at Washington and 3rd Avenue, slowly moving east. A smaller crowd is at Nicollet and 4th Street. And yet another large group is at Hennepin and 5th, moving towards the 1st precinct. Hundreds of state troopers in riot gear are downtown at this point, but never deployed to the 3rd.
State is wondering where they are needed. They're currently at 6th and Hennepin.
Do you think the rioters were trying to spread the MPD thin?
I do. We were defending an entire city with, 600 or 700 officers, but against thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Again, some of them protesting peacefully, many of them not. And it wasn't a matter of planning. It was a matter of simple math. We did not have the numbers.
Back at the 3rd, the situation is deteriorating fast.
We got individuals breaching the gate at the 3rd precinct. We also got people trying to breach the front doors.
They're through our front door.
By 9 p.m., there's a SWAT team on the roof and a strike team guarding the perimeter.
It was lit that night.
Bottles, paintballs, all directed at officers in the rear lot. We got heavy concrete coming in at us, glass bottles. How is it inside of the precinct?
And they're surrounded by smoke and fire. The auto parts store, the liquor store, the pawn shop a couple blocks down the street, all fully engulfed at this point. By 9:15, officers in the front line know they're losing the battle and ask to use small explosive scatter rounds that disperse gas like buckshot,
Man,
but still
clean up for
considered
that, man.
less lethal force.
They're shooting mortars at us, and they're doing it from a distance of about maybe 75 to 100 yards, and we can't reach them. Can we escalate our use of force to deploy scat rounds?
Negative on the scat round. Go for it again. Negative on the scat round. There's another plan in place. Stand by.
But according to those who were there was no plan,
I'm a little confused about what we're talking about.
and they were running out of ammunition.
You are authorized to use CS triple chase to push that crowd back.
We would, but we don't have it.
Anyone at the roof of the 3rd Precinct who can give me some information, please call me.
And soon the protesters seemed to be coming from everywhere.
They've reached the northwest corner of the fence. They're coming in. They're coming in the back.
At 9:32, Chief Arredondo calls the mayor to tell him they've lost control, can no longer maintain order in the city. The mayor gives the order to evacuate the precinct.
You had somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 officers inside the 3rd Precinct. You had thousands of people outside the 3rd Precinct. The doors had been busted. People were moving in. Hand-to-hand combat was definite. And the likelihood of very serious injury and death was high. Death to either one of our officers or somebody from the general public. That was not a consequence that I could have on my watch.
But first, they had to escape. With protesters inside the precinct, police swept the building to make sure no one was left behind.
We need to move. We need to move.
A lot of debris coming in.
Dry scene floor members, return to your vehicles.
I'm finishing clearing the building.
You have to evacuate right now. We need to go. As of right now, we can leave southbound. We're going to lose that opportunity in about 30 seconds. We got to go. We're sitting ducks here. They're about to breach the back gate.
Then they discover the back gate's been padlocked from the outside.
They can't get the gate open.
Video posted on YouTube shows squad cars crashing through the back gate, giving cover to the officers who are escaping on foot.
We're actually intermixed with the cops on foot, trying to give them a fighting chance here. Looks like the precinct is on fire here. As we leave dispatch, I think you can start your roll call. Bring a couple more squads up to the front. We're going to convoy our officers safely to the new staging location, please.
We're protecting firefighters. They have the scene under control, but if protesters start making their way east, we won't have enough.
And then at 10:13, Chief Arredondo, who's monitoring the scene from a couple blocks away, gets on the radio to announce defeat.
Get a citywide tone right now in our loss of the 3rd Precinct.
The 3rd Precinct has been compromised.
Why didn't we have a better plan to evacuate everybody safely instead of squad cars ramming the gate to get out and literally officers running next to the squads to leave?
That was my desk.
Officer Walker went back the next day to photograph the aftermath. A ransacked police precinct. He says many of the officers who were there that night sent final text messages to loved ones in case they didn't make it out alive.
When the order came to evacuate, I can assure you that I don't believe you'll find one Minneapolis cop that was out there that thought that that was the right decision.
The mayor believes it was the only decision.
Imagine if one of our officers was killed in the line of duty during the defense of the 3rd Precinct. Imagine if multiple officers were killed. Imagine if a single person, a single member of the public was shot and killed. Consider what would have ensued after that. It's not something that our city would have handled.
Just before midnight, the state will take over command. By Friday morning, the State Patrol and National Guard will reclaim the gutted 3rd Precinct. Questions about whether the fall of the 3rd could have been avoided will linger for years. A police precinct abandoned in America. A symbolic victory for the rioters, and the beginning of a reckoning across the nation. For the Fox 9 investigator.
Wow. You know, watching that and just going back into what I can remember, and it was crazy being down there. I mean, you know, seeing Minnehaha Liquor, seeing cars being burnt in Target parking lot. Seeing the rundown through like Dollar Tree, seeing the school over there, the Dollar Tree. I think I already said that. The businesses. It was just wild. It was like wild, wild west. The pawn shop, Aldi's, Wendy's. There was so much. The post office was over there. God, it was just. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was wild. It was crazy. To see the things that we've seen, to be in the atmosphere that we are around. We were seeing, kids being shot with rubber bullets. Children being sprayed with pepper spray. You know what I'm saying? So it was really, not only were we protesting, but you were also trying to take care of others to make sure that they could, that they were safe, that they were, at least some of people were, maybe not everybody. But I did feel way different back then than I do now. Because it was wild. There was a lot of wild times during that uprising. I remember, going inside and, Walgreens or Robert Shoes over or Freedman's, I should say Freedman's, not Roberts, Freedman's, over on West Broadway, or going into like the Dollar General and seeing the mall over there, the strip mall, the walk-in McDonald's. You can only go through the drive-through. It's just, they have a walk-up too, but the damage that was done over there, and it was wild, and it was all along Broadway. It was going out to Robbinsdale to, I remember them protecting the gun shop out there. You know what I'm saying? It was a wild time. I remember when people were headed to the Mall of America, and yeah, that was wild. That was wild. And to see how many people they had protecting it from the National Guard, and then Bloomington Police. Yeah, that whole first month was wild, was hectic, because it was always, there was a lot of miles driven too, because it would be, at night, we're all the way up in the, during the cities, come home at probably like 3, 4 in the morning, get some sleep, go back up there about 12 or 1, start driving back up there. It was like, yeah, there was times where you couldn't even get gas if you needed it to leave, the Twin Cities. There was curfews. There was, damn, there was so much drama. To be honest, I sit here and think about it, and it's like all the things that you see in the movies was happening. GTA, Call of Duty. It was lawless. I don't know how many apartment buildings I've seen on fire, ATMs being ripped open, stores being looted. It was total chaos. And it was, yeah. I don't know if there will ever be another time that people will, I can compare it to that. The uprising of, even when it came down to Dante, Brooklyn Center was pretty lit, but it wasn't the way that what Minneapolis was. Even when the individual who ended up killing himself downtown, they said it was a police involved shooting, but it was actually, he committed suicide. Shit, I remember people looting that night. I remember downtown Minneapolis being crazy as hell, and people were just, to be honest, I think it was normal. I think people looked at that as, honestly, as being something normal. And that was, to be honest, that was crazy to me, is because that's not the way that it was ever. And now looking back at Minneapolis pre-George Floyd, and to looking at it now, it's the shell of a city that it used to be. And I bet you it was the same way with Philadelphia, when they had the move bombing, or, in 1992 during the LA riots, or back in the 60s, I think it was 68 or 69, they had Watts, or the early 70s when they had Detroit. There is no coming back. I honestly believe when something like that happens, there isn't no coming back from it. There isn't no more building that beauty that everybody once seen it, that you grew up in, and I do believe that's why people moved from like Chicago or Milwaukee or, Boston and things like that, because it's so much of their history is already gone that they grew up with during the different situations that has been going on through our communities. And so people, they're looking for a change. And I don't know what else to say, to be honest. I hope that people do realize that, it's not just a Minneapolis thing. We do have corruption, waste, fraud in Minnesota. When it comes down to our politicians, when it comes down to our people that are supposed to care for our community, and they don't. And that's something that we definitely need to be having a conversation about, because it's not always about what people want y'all to believe. It's not about, the hate. It's not about, jealousy or envy. It's actually about people wanting to make a difference inside their community. It's about people wanting to expose the evils that is going on in our community so we can make a difference, so we can be a change. Instead of seeing people being traumatized or having to go through situations over and over again, shouldn't our message, our goals be to stop that? That's what I would believe. So I want everybody to have a great Thursday. I hope everybody was a little bit educated when it came down to the 15th Amendment today. And it's crazy. I hope people looked at the controversial tree display, the churches, down in Rochester, sanctuary. I thought it was already a sanctuary. We talked about, $12 million in training could potentially be erased when it came down to Philando, Castile, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, $1 million cover-ups. So with that being said, man, I want y'all to Winterfell, freedom or jail, heaven or hell, wish me well. And here is Don Tripp, Outside the Lines. And I'll be back same time, same place. See you tomorrow.
Yeah. Sometimes I color outside the lines. Yeah. Start tripping and get lost in this mind of mine. Yeah. Fuck it. Sometimes I can't stay inside the lines. No matter what I go through, I find time to grind. Cause if I take a day off, then we fall behind. And if the bill's late, it's nobody's fault but mine. All this weight I carry, I find it hard to smile. And when they turn their backs, I ain't at all surprised. I knew they wasn't who they claim, I saw all the signs. I still see the picture clear through my watery eyes. The more I try to hold it in, the harder I cry. I keep making new mistakes, the harder I try. I would probably choke to death if I swallowed my pride. No matter what I endure, I gotta survive. Cause when the blood's in the water, the sharks will arrive. Yeah. Start tripping and get lost in this mind of mine. Sometimes I color outside the lines. I get impatient as I wait for the stars to align. Sometimes I lose myself and then become harder to find. Then I get lost and think whatever I find is mine. And when I'm hurt, I think whoever I find's a diamond. Forgetting who they really are until time reminds me why I made the decision to leave them all behind me. If life's a movie, gotta stop trying to pause and rewind it. Cause this